Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be working on a fake Amtrak GG1. This is a Tyco product from 1977, and if you can believe it, it's actually a distant relative of the older but much more realistic Penline locomotives. When Tyco designers got their hands on this, they wanted to make it more for a mass market, so they cheapened the design by removing a couple of wheel sets, shrinking the locomotive in the middle, and adding a fuel cell to an electric locomotive for some extra weight, which is a little bit peculiar. So they're kind of controversial engines in the community, but a lot of Tyco collectors out there really like these things. Anyways, this specific model was sent in a couple years ago from David Z to G scale, and unfortunately it's not running all that great. It's got the power torque drive, which is notorious for a bunch of different issues, so it's definitely going to need some repairs. It does technically run, but I mean at 16 volts it's just creeping forward when it should be flying around. So anyways, I'll take it over to the track. I'll show all of you what it's currently doing right now, and then we'll crack it open and see if we can correct whatever's gone wrong with the drive in this case. So here's what's currently going on if we get this thing set up on the track. Give it a little bit of power here. You can see it is kind of moving, but it's ridiculously weak, and this is on a full 16 or so volts of power, and with a little 3-pole motor like this one has, it should just be kind of whizzing around, but it's just not having it, so it's definitely going to need some work. I can already see on the bottom here the drive wheels are actually not too bad. The ones on the back here are not so great, and I think the drive is probably gummed up with old grease, if not dust and hair and stuff. So we'll see if we can improve this thing at all. The good news is that since it's moving ever so slightly, it's certainly not a hopeless model. It just needs a little bit of work. So we'll make our way in here. Unfortunately, these Tyco drives are known for having a lot of different problems. One of the big ones being that they had exposed gears on the bottom, and most of the train sets at the time came with track that didn't have any road bed. So all the houses in the 70s with shag carpet were pretty much magnets for these gears, and they would all get sucked into the drive, which I think is exactly what's happened with this one. You can already see a little bit of that kind of thing going on up here, and I think it's going to look way worse once we're actually inside. And we've got some pretty significant dust bunnies already here. Let's see what's going on under the gears. This is where a lot of the nastiness usually hides. Huh, that's interesting. It's actually not that bad on this side. This one's got a little bit, but not anything too bad. And this one's just got a bit of a lump right there. These gears are still pretty sticky with old oil, so this is all going to need to be cleaned. Now let's have a bit of a gander through the motor. That is one very messy commutator. The springs and everything else don't look too bad though. I think this one right here might just look worse than it actually is. Sometimes these things get over oiled and it actually ends up on the commutator, so I bet this will tidy up quite well. And then using something softer than the copper plates right here, we'll clean all the mica slots. I learned the name of these from a guy named James from Dundas Junction. He actually used to work at a factory where they'd rebuild motors, and apparently when they build them, they put pieces of mica between them, so that's why they're called that. Now just before cleaning all this up, we'll remove some of this leftover hair and stuff that's on here. This is the exact kind of thing that ruins the motors in these. That's no wonder this thing wasn't running all that well. Now I think at this point, work on scrubbing all the gears. Just throw them in this warm soapy water. Works as a pretty good budget degreaser, honestly. And while we're in here, also scrub the whole block clean. Alright, just gonna go rinse all these parts now. As these parts dry too, I'm just going through and just looking for any leftover pieces of hair. Sometimes they're tricky to spot, but it's still there. And if you're working on like something that's sentimental and you really want it to run well, I find just going through each tooth with a pick can really help. It's always a good idea too when you have these things open to go through them with an X-Acto and just cut off any leftover flashing. They weren't exactly neat when they were making these back in the 70s. And now using a track braid, I'll just quickly polish up the wheels here. So I think at this point, with all the parts all cleaned up, start to put everything back together. I'll begin by adding oil to some of the pivots. Put a bit of oil over that and throw on the main gear. I also personally like to throw just a little touch of grease. They had grease when they came from the factory, and I think it helps to prevent the squeaking noises as these things age and the parts become a little more loose. I think that a bit of the magic smoke has definitely been let out, but it doesn't mean the motor won't still work. I mean, it moved even with all that junk in the drive, so I think it's going to be fine. You can add plenty of oil to this bearing without having any problems. You just don't want to over-oil the one on the other side. And I'll throw the pivot gear back on there, making sure this is pressed in all the way. Once you get this in place, I'll just throw some oil on the teeth. I'm going to put some CA up here, and putting oil first is always a good idea, just as long as it's not on the top, because if the glue goes the wrong way, the lubricant will at least prevent the glue from sticking to the teeth, so you can clean it up. And that's about how we want it. I'm going to try to reconnect the plate to the commutator. This part's always fun. That isn't at all how you're supposed to put these back together. From the factory, they would have actually put in the brushes and then put the springs in, cover them up with those plates, but I find this plastic is so brittle that sometimes trying to put these plates back in can be a bit finicky, so that kind of works. Now we'll see if the motor actually runs. It's perfect. Now this bearing right here can be oiled, but like put practically nothing like that. Just kind of let it work its way in there. So if you put too much oil, it will end up on the commutator and it will start to burn. Notice that this part of the shell right here is not sitting against the body. Kind of hard to see, but there's actually a wire. Which looks like it's kind of going a direction it's not supposed to. So we'll see if we can just kind of push that back into place. Okay, that's better. Now let's work on the rear truck. Also notice this miscellaneous wire, which, I don't know, that looks like someone's handiwork there. So right here, all looks okay. You've just got the one wire connected, which is normal for these Tycos. So I'm going to remove this weight, see if we can figure out where that wire is supposed to go. I don't like that something that could have power in it is just kind of bouncing around. Yeah, see what they did. The fuel cell is connected all around here, so I think the real way you're supposed to remove the weight is to kind of work your way under here. Okay. What is going on here? What is this for? Doesn't even go anywhere. I don't know. Somebody must have been trying to add another light to this at some point. I'll put some of these things back into place. We got the two diodes right here. These control the directional lighting on this locomotive. Let's try to kind of line up this card right here. Before we go throwing this thing on the track, I'm just going to try quickly coating the wheels with some Oxguard. This is something a lot of people in the community said they've had good experience with. And the reason I want to add it to this locomotive is because this is all bare metal now that the oxidization and grease and everything has been scraped away. So any moisture is going to re-oxidize the metal really quickly. So I'm just going to try just kind of running a really thin coat over each wheel. We'll see if this helps extend how long the wheels stay clean for. On most drive systems you can't turn over the wheels manually, but certainly can on these Power Torques since the pancake motor is in line and there's no worm gear. I'll just quickly throw some couplers on this thing. I think we'll go with a nice cheap Bachmann Easy Mate coupler. And then your vintage horn hook. I think this one will work. That looks good. Looks like this coupler has a little bit too short of a shank, so I'm going to have to remove that. Seems to turn freely, so I think that that's a good match. I know some people are probably wondering why I'm throwing a knuckle coupler on one side and a horn hook on the other, and in most cases I would just, go with one or the other, but since this is a symmetric locomotive, I feel like this is actually a good solution because, if I want to run more modern consist, it's got the knuckle coupler. If I want to run more of a classic train, we've got that, so it should be good. Anyways, let's take this thing over to the track and see if it will run. Feel pretty good about this one, but it's never guaranteed. Absolutely nothing. I must have screwed something up. Not exactly sure what I did wrong, but if I had to take a guess, it would be that I must have broken a wire and not noticed. So we'll check this one. Seems pretty solid. That all looks good too. I'm thinking since the light isn't turning on there, maybe I didn't tighten down that ground screw enough. Well, lo and behold. It's amazing something as simple as that can mess one of these up. Okay, 2 times the charm. Hey, that's more like it. Yeah, that's great. It's running about as smooth as these Power Torques usually do. We'll see if it breaks in a little bit. Well, as far as Power Torques go, this is certainly not half bad. Let's see what the low speed is like. It's not half bad. Let's go pick up some cargo. Well, folks, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. I'm actually quite happy with how this thing turned out. I think for a Power Torque, it's running pretty darn well. It might be a fake Amtrak locomotive, but it even looks half decent with these cars, so it really is the fake it till you make it unit. Anyways, that'll be it for the repair. Thank you to everyone who suggested that I repair this locomotive. I'm definitely going to be following up on more requested engines so we can get more stuff here on the bench. But anyways, until then, I just want to thank you all so much for watching.